Hello and welcome to Podcast.init, the podcast about Python and the people who make it great. When you're ready to launch your next app or want to try a project you hear about on the show, you'll need somewhere to deploy it, so take a look at our friends over at Linode. With 200 gigabit private networking, node balancers, a 40 gigabit public network, fast object storage, and a brand new managed Kubernetes platform, all controlled by a convenient API, you've got everything you need to scale up. And for your tasks that need fast computation, such as training machine learning models or running your CI and CD pipelines, they've got dedicated CPU and GPU instances. Go to pythonpodcast.com/linode, that's Linode today to get a $20 credit and launch a new server in under a minute. And don't forget to thank them for their continued support of this show. Your host as usual is Tobias Macy, and today I'm interviewing Nicolas, Évrard, Cédric, Krier, and Jonathan Levy about Triton. So, Nicolas, can you start by introducing yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. So I'm Nicolas. I work for B2CK, which is a company working on Triton, and I'm also the president of the Triton Foundation, which is the subject of today.
And Cédric, how about yourself?
Hello everybody. So I'm Cédric Krier. I'm the co-worker of Nicolas at B2CK, and I'm currently serving as the leader of the Triton project.
And Jonathan, how about you?
Yes, my name is John Levy, and I am not one of the core devs like Nicolas and Cédric. I am instead a Triton user. I am a lawyer by training with Advocate Consulting Legal Group, and we have been using Triton for 8 years, and I'm involved also with the Triton Foundation.
And going back to you, Nicolas, do you remember how you first got introduced to Python?
Oh, it's almost 20 years ago, in fact. I was at the university. I did my thesis in Scheme, which is a dialect of Lisp. And when I was job hunting, of course, there is not many job for Scheme programmers, but one guy on the mailing list told me you should be looking at Python. And indeed, it was a good idea because I was hired by Aragne, which is a company in Belgium, the one that organized the very first EuroPython conference. And there I worked on Plone and Zope. So it was in 2001, I guess, something like that.
And Cédric, how about you? Do you remember how you got introduced to Python?
I'm not sure, but I think it's about 15 years ago when I started to work at a company, Tiny ERP, which was writing an ERP in Python. So it's just, I learned from there.
And Jonathan, how about you?
Well, so as I said before, I am a lawyer by training, but I ended up at a firm that also did some heavy accounting work. And we had a series of Excel workbooks that someone along the line had programmed some Visual Basic for applications, but there wasn't anyone left in the company who was able to work with that. That person had left. And so I decided to dig in and thought, well, I've always been curious about programming, so let's see if I can do this. And so I took over the Visual Basic for applications stuff, and that got bigger and bigger over the course of some years and got to the point where that tool wasn't going to cut it. We were going to need a bigger tool. An engineer friend of mine suggested that I should learn Python. I did some study on that, tried to do migrating from Excel to a Django project that didn't go so well, and then I transitioned from the Django project to Triton.
And so in terms of the Triton project itself, can you describe a bit about what it is and how it got started?
So Triton is in fact a business software framework. So it provides all the required pieces that are needed to create business applications. And on top of that, the Triton project provides also a set of modules that are covering a wide variety of use cases. It started 11 years ago. I don't remember the date exactly. And it's a fork of Tiny ERP, in fact, which is, better known now as Odoo, I guess that a lot of people know Odoo already. It's also a Belgian company where Cédric and we both work at the time, and we decided to leave this company and to create a fork I will let probably Cédric explain the reason of the fork, because he's the one behind.
Okay, so indeed it was 10 years ago, I think, or a little bit more. Another co-worker, Bertrand Chenal, and me were working at Tiny on the ERP, and we were not very satisfied by the quality of the product and how the project was managed, and how it was evolving. And so, as it was an open source project, we decided to leave the company and start our own version of this ERP. And so we founded B2CK as a company to provide services, and we started to work on Triton and redesign and change what we wanted to change. Task we worked on was to improve the quality by adding tests. We make the development more open. So we publish it our repository, because at this time TinyRP didn't publish its repository, and we also improved the design of all the modules and how they communicate each other. So this took us about 1 year of work until we got the first release, the 1.0, and then since there we make a release every 6 months, new modules and so on.
And you mentioned at the beginning that you're all members of the foundation for Triton. I'm curious if you can discuss the relationship between the Triton Foundation and the Triton project and the reasoning for creating that type of an entity for governing and managing the project.
Sure. If I could jump in quickly to answer that. So the Triton project, from my view, has shown a great commitment to the principles of open source. And B2CK, where Cédric and Nicolas are, is a company that has devoted a lot of resources to furthering Triton. But my feeling was that they didn't want a perception of that this was really pigeonholed by B2CK, and instead they proactively took the step of forming the foundation as a nonprofit under Belgian law and contributing all the intellectual property of the Triton project to that foundation. Now, B2CK remains very dedicated to advancing Triton, but I think that the foundation exists to make sure that Triton will remain a healthy open source project into the future without relying on any specific company.
Yes. I may add something, maybe?
Please.
Indeed, it's exactly that. In fact, as we are a fork of Tiny ERP, or at that time it was Open ERP, we receive a lot of requests of companies that would like to invest their time in Triton, but some of those were afraid that B2CK was the main driving force, and that's one day or another we might close the source code and have a complete control over the project. And that's how, as Jonathan said, we decided to create a Belgian foundation, because those foundation under the Belgian laws make it a requirement that you have to follow non-profit goal. And in this case, it's the development and publicity of Triton. And there's a small mistake. The foundation doesn't hold the copyright. In fact, every contributor still holds his copyright. So Jonathan, for example, holds his copyright. Everybody holds his own copyright. And so it makes it difficult to change the license of the project, because our license is GPL v3 or later. And you would have, if you want to change, to contact everybody. And the fact that you have to contact so many people, it will make it difficult. And it allows us to keep the GPL, I guess, forever.
Yeah, I know that things like contributor license agreements have been a very contentious topic in a lot of different projects, so it's interesting that you've decided to avoid that entirely and just let everybody own their own copyright as a guard against somebody relicensing the project in the future.
Yes, that's exactly that. That's the contributor license agreement that we have some issues with, and we decided to guard us against those changes by distributing the copyright. Exactly that. You're on point.
Yeah, indeed, we are in the same situation as the Linux kernel, which is GPL2, but it's also the copyright is shared with a lot of developers. So it's a kind of protection in some way.
And so the project itself is focused on providing the software and the utilities necessary for being able to run and manage a business. I'm curious if you can discuss a bit about the types of businesses that Triton is most well suited to and some of the cases where it might not be a good fit for a particular type of business.
Indeed, the main target of Triton is the small and medium enterprise. So I would say it goes from 1 employee to 200 employees. And for now, the functionality that are covered by Triton can be helpful to companies that are in the wholesale business, or they have to manage a warehouse or the stock. Also, it works for service companies and for production companies. The type of companies that for now we are not providing good enough features for them is mainly the small retails companies, because mainly we don't have a point of sale for now. And also what we have seen is that we don't fit well with companies that are not well organized. When very small companies sometimes works with just papers and post-it and so on, and they have very difficulties to go with an organized tool that force them to follow some workflow and stuff like that. So usually it's because this kind of small companies are not mature enough for an ERP. But sometimes trying to implement an ERP inside the company is also a way to organize the company and follow the best practice and define workflow and so on. Anyone has others?
So the way that I would describe it is, first we have to talk about what exactly Triton is. So there's the Triton kernel, which interacts with the database, typically Postgres. And on top of the kernel, people implement these plugins. And so as Cédric was describing, there are excellent warehouse plugins, excellent project for service companies plugins. And so there's a divide between Triton can be fantastic for some companies that may not have pre-made, ready-to-go modules available. It would just require somebody to write the module, okay? I would say that, thinking about it broadly that way, any company that is needing a database to keep track of, their internal machinations, and where Postgres would be an appropriate database, any company like that, Triton would be certainly a project to consider. And very likely they would find that there are ready-to-go, off-the-shelf modules that can take care of what they need. Now, as far as where it wouldn't be a good fit, there are companies that don't use a database, as Cédric was saying, that maybe they are small enough that they can just kind of keep track of things just personally. And sure, if they don't need a database, Triton wouldn't be the project for them. But if you need a database and Postgres is the right scale of database, then I would say Triton is something to consider.
And so in terms of the end users of Triton, I guess, who is it designed to be targeted at primarily as far as the people who are going to be interacting with it on a day-to-day basis? And what are some of the considerations or design challenges that you face in terms of evolving the product, keeping those people in mind?
Oh, that's a tough one. Triton is mainly, as it is an ERP, it's mainly it's designed for back office users. So we have two clients. One, which is the original client that was developed, which came from the fork. It's a GTK client, so based on the toolkit made from the GNOME project. And we have the JavaScript client, which obviously works through your browser. And we try to make those the most ergonomic as possible, but it's not an easy task. I think that the GTK client is probably more ergonomic than the JavaScript one. But indeed, on the other hand, the JavaScript one is easier to deploy and so on, so it has its pro, and it's quite difficult to know which one to choose, in fact. I think people can use both. And usually back office user will use the GTK client that they can install, and those back office users are accountants, purchase management people, and account managers and people like that they do form filling, and they have to search some information in the system to see why a shipment hasn't arrived, or to fill the fact that you have lost 10 pieces of a product or something.
Yeah, and the way we try to keep the ergonomy and the satisfaction of the users, it's that we try to make change a small step at a time and build on the existing and try to refine it and improve it progressively. This way we have early feedback for a small change, and we try to always improve it or take the feedback in consideration for the next proposal of change. And also, as it's a community project, we have inputs from the whole community who can say the word about the interface and the ergonomy and how things are done. So.
And then as far as the actual workflow of using Triton and being able to maintain an appropriate level of structure for the workflows while providing the flexibility needed to model a given business, I'm curious if you can just talk through maybe the day-to-day interaction of a typical user of Triton and maybe some of the customizations that can be applied to simplify their operations or to match the specifics of their organization.
Okay, so the main goal of an ERP is to centralize the data in one database. So this way you don't need to duplicate and to re-enter the data in many different software. And also it helps you to keep the integrity of your data. So the typical workflow that you have in Triton is that you have the salesman who enter a sale order in the application. So he will select an existing party from the address book already stored in the system, and he will pick some product that is selling. And once he has filled the sale order, he will just confirm by clicking on a button, and automatically the system will create the shipment document to ship the product to the customer, but also the invoice for the accounting. And also, as you have a shipment to send, the system will know automatically if you need to purchase, to supply the warehouse from where you are shipping the product, because maybe you don't have enough product for this sale order, or you have a rule that you want a minimal quantity of product. And then automatically Triton will create a purchase request for the missing products, and the purchase manager can see those requests that are created automatically, and he can convert into a purchase order by selecting the supplier that fits for this purchase, and make the negotiation with the supplier to receive the product. And this document, the purchase that will be created out of the request, will also create a shipment, but an incoming shipment from the supplier. And so when you receive the product, you will validate the incoming shipment that will fill the warehouse, and you will know that your shipment for the customer, you can now process it because you have received the product. So as all the information is stored into one database, the information is shared across all the documents, and they can trigger automatically some step in the workflow and so on.
So what was just described there was functionality that you get through a module. So that was we don't use that module. Is that the product shipment module or the warehouse module that
Yes,
you described?
Yeah, it's for...
And Triton, the way I would think about it is that you have the desktop client that gives you automatically many tools for browsing or editing the data in the database, as well as excellent tools for restricting access or creating groups of users that have limited access to various parts of the database. And that is just automatic, self-working. You get the system going and you have that layer. In addition, based on your company's specific needs, you can write workflows into modules. And so you would create a custom module for your company, or maybe there's an off-the-shelf one that fits you well, because there are many off-the-shelf ones now, that will allow you to go through a workflow, as was described there, where you place an order and then take it from order placement through every stage of the warehouse and the shipment out, etc. But you have the flexibility to write whatever workflow you require. Typically, how your employees are using Triton, it depends on what the employee's role is, what they need to do. They can use it in either way, to just browse and edit the software, the database information, or to take steps through specific workflows that are written into a module.
Yes, of course. Each workflow step can be customized, can be automated or not, and you can add more steps if you want. Everything is flexible on this side.
So this is probably a good opportunity to talk a bit more about the architecture and the implementation of Triton and some of the ways that it has evolved since you first forked it from the parent project.
So the architecture of Triton is a synchronous 3 tiers application. So the usual 3 tiers, the database, how do you say that, the business logic, and then the client, which as I explained are both thin clients, one available for the desktop users and one for people through their browser in JavaScript. And so this is the big picture. Then in Triton you have several layers. So the first one, which provides the access to the database, which is currently following an active record pattern. Previously, it was using a data mapper because Tiny ERP at that time was using this pattern. They switch later, but it has nothing to do with us. And thanks to the active record, we can do introspection on the classes, and we infer the database schema, and we create new columns in the tables. We create, of course, also the tables if it's required. Then you have all the business logic, where you have the notion of users, groups, and then everything that is needed by your module, your own module. So, for example, if you make a module that will model a sale, you will obviously have the sale header with the company that is selling something, the party you are selling to, the currency you are using. Then you will have some cell lines with the quantity you sell, the unit of the product you are selling, the product, of course, you are selling, the taxes, and so on and so on. And with all that, you have one Triton module which models the workflow, which pilots all the steps that your sale will go through. So, for example, you create in the start a draft sale, and then you confirm the sale after discussing it with your customers, and afterwards you process the sale, and it will create shipments eventually if you are selling a product and so on. It will also create an invoice, etc., etc. And the next step is displaying all this information to the user, because we have the code, but we have to have a user interface. And the user interface is specified also in the modules thanks to XML files, which defines how the fields are set up on the screens. It's almost like HTML if you want, but less flexible. And we send this XML to the client. The client display all the fields on the screen, and the user have also the buttons so they can trigger workflow steps and so on.
I just want to add that a particularity of Triton and in the design, it's the modules and the modularity. What happens is that each module can define classes. They can be base classes or a kind of partial class that will be used to construct the main class of the active record. So depending of which module are activated, the server will build dynamically the class by composing all the small parts of all the small classes that are disseminated in different modules to construct the main class for a kind of document. This way, we can have a module that defines a main object. I can keep with the sale example, and have another module that extends the sale model by adding, for example, a new field or a new step in the workflow or new methods and so on. So the server will combine both classes to create one main class that will always be used by the server to manipulate the object. So we dynamically create those base class, and this gives the power of in Triton to be very flexible, because by activate a module in Triton, you can modify the behavior of existing objects directly, and you can really modify any property of the object. It can be the fields or the methods on it, and so on. And of course, thanks to the introspection to create the database scheme, the activating a modules that add a new field will automatically create the new columns in the database.
Well, let me talk about that just a little bit more, because what Cédric is talking about here is one of the things about Triton that I find remarkably clever. And it's this different inheritance model where, let's say that you have a base module like the party module, okay, which is a standard module that's off the shelf, and it defines a party class. And then you have two other modules that you want to rely on. And say one of them creates a variant of party where now they have some new database attribute. Let's say middle name. Let's say base party has just first and last name. Now this other module has middle name. And now you can create a second new module that also extends party, adding whatever methods or business logic or database columns you like. And you don't need to have a linear tree of inheritance where you've got base module party, and then module A inherits the party model from the party module, and then module B inherits it from module A. Instead, there's this plug-in logic that's used that allows you to use these modules much more flexibly and install them through pip, and of course, anything that is powerful, you could get yourself into trouble, right? And so you do need, of course, to be careful that you're not going to create contradictions across the modules. But it's a very clever different inheritance scheme that I've never seen anywhere else. And Triton uses that to let you use modules and just sort of plug them in as you like. And it provides you with some very useful hooks to take care of things like migrations in the register method of models and stuff like that. I think that it is just very well designed for modularity. And Cédric, I have never asked you, but where did this idea for that inheritance model come from? Is that something you saw somewhere, or did you just think of that? And the way it's done is through it'll construct this multiple inheritance where at startup time, you're creating a new class that's inheriting multiply from each of the declarations in each of the submodules.
In fact, I can reply to that because that's an idea we had with a former tiny ERP employee, Gaëtan de Menten. When I was there, we were working together there. We had 1 month to do something that we found cool. And I remember that we've done that together. So it exists also in Odoo, in fact, and we had 1 month to do it. It was a bit too short, so the Fabien, the guy behind Odoo, finished it, but not as cleanly as we would have done it. And the idea, it's basically, it comes from the fact that we were playing with meta classes in Python at that time, and we were pretty convinced that by using meta classes, you could create classes that would do what Triton does now, and what Odoo does also, of course. So it's an idea we had, I don't know, maybe 14 years ago or 13 years.
For the record, I ran into a similar design, indeed in Firefox. Yeah, but it's. I think it's no more in the current add-ons because they use web extension standard. But before that, you could tune all the interface, the XUL stuff, I don't know if people remember. And they were also merging kind of classes together to compose the interface and the behavior. It's the only time I see something similar, a little bit similar, that depending on what is activated, you compose a class with partial classes around. But for sure, that's one of the power of the main reason to use Triton is this powerful extension way, because it allows us to build simple modules with simple functionality and compose them. You pick the modules you want to use by functionality, and you can just extend them or make some glue to make them work together as you like. And this way you reuse a lot of existing stuff that the project provides, and you have just some glue code or some small customization to create.
So for somebody who's interested in creating their own extensions and modules to plug into Triton, what is actually the process of getting something started and getting it integrated? And what are the available extension points for Triton for them to be able to customize any particular internal behavior of it?
I would say first to start to create your own modules. What the project provides a cookie cutter template. I don't know if you know about it. Cookie Cutter is a project to scaffold. Project. So it asks some questions about the name, the version you want to use, and so on. And it creates for you the skeleton of the modules. And it's something already working. You can just put it in the Triton modules folder, and you have your module. But of course, it does nothing because you have put any new logical in it. But from there, you can define a new class that will be registered in the system or modify an existing class. So that's for the Python part. You write classes in your module. And as Nicolas said, for the view layer, you just have to write some XML layers that define the position of the fields on the screen. And that's the way you start to work to customize Triton for you. Now, if you want to contribute to Triton, the best is to first fetch the source code from the repository. It's on the website of Triton. And we have a procedure to submit patches through a code review process. And we welcome any improvement that people can provide on Triton. So creating a patch is the simple way when you want to fix or improve small stuff. Once you start to be confident and you think you can contribute a full module, we first ask people to write what we call a blueprint. So it's a description of your goals and how you are going to implement it and so on. It's on our forum that you post that, and people can discuss about the ideas and the design and so on until we reach a kind of agreement about the best solution and the best way to implement the new feature. And then once it's agreed, you can submit a big patch with all your modules, and then start the review process from the community and so on until again we reach an agreement about the quality of the submission. And once it's done, one of the core developers will push for you the new module on the Triton repository, and it will be part of the next release.
Now that, of course, is the process for sort of one of the official core modules. You can, of course, write your own module for your own business, or you can write modules that you open source, and there are a significant number of modules available on GitHub or Bitbucket that are not part of the core or not officially, sanctioned by the Triton project. And so, of course, use them at your own risk and always know what you're installing. But there are other modules available.
Yeah, of course,
than just the core one.
You can publish your module on PyPy. A module is a standard Python package that you can find a lot of them on PyPy. By the way, we have a classifier on PyPy, the Triton. I think it's framework Triton, so people can use it to filter and to find Triton modules there.
And in terms of the overall project itself, as you mentioned, it's been around for a number of years now, and I'm curious if you were to completely start the whole project over today, if there were any elements of it that you would reconsider or redesign given the current state of the art and the available libraries and ecosystem.
Yes.
Indeed, it's a little bit difficult to answer, because one thing we do with Triton is when we think there is something out that exists and is better than something we have done, we are not fear to trash what we have done and use the new stuff. So the project has evolved a lot in 10 years, and we have included or reused existing tools or framework that we found that are better than what we had. So at some point, I would say if I had to start Triton now, I guess it will be as it is now. Of course, without all the previous version, different tools that we were using back at that time. But At some way, I have no idea. Maybe we will change something tomorrow because we found something better for a specific need. But for now, I don't see really. I have nothing in mind.
When we thought about this question earlier today, we had one stuff that we would probably not include. It's the fact that you can have per process a connection to multiple databases. Currently, that's what we do. Probably that's something that we would not do again.
Right. And am I right to understand that the Docker is the big changing technology there? That when that was built, the idea was, well, you're going to have one server running Triton and it may need to connect to a lot of things, whereas now you can spin up multiple Docker
yes,
processes.
indeed. Now most of the deployment of Triton now are just to connect to one database because it's much cheaper to start a new process, and so this feature in Triton indeed is mainly used by developers. Well, they start one Triton and they switch from one database to another to test different case or scenario. But in production, it's not really used. And indeed, it adds some complexity in some part of Triton that could be removed and simplified. That's a point.
And then, as far as the sustainability of the project, we mentioned that there is the foundation that is there to serve as the governing agent, and B2CK is at least one company that's involved in the continued development of it. But I'm curious how you're approaching just the overall day-to-day of being able to ensure that necessary work gets done and that the project is evolving, and some of the approach that you use to ensure the ongoing stability and security of the project, given the criticality of it to a number of people's businesses.
So for the project itself, the foundation rely on the fact that it will receive donations from people, and hopefully we are very lean, so we don't have a lot of costs. And with the few donations that we have now, it allows us to have all our servers, the trademarks that are paid, and we have also some money to organize sometimes Triton gatherings of developers or conferences. And for the project in itself, as we are a free software project, we really rely on the fact that people use our project and need it to exist for their business. So B2CK, for example, we have customers and they pay us to work on Triton, and there are other companies that do that. So in Spain, in Argentina, Germany, and so on, France, of course. And thanks to them, we are allowed to dedicate some time on the free software project. Although we are a small project when you compare us to the Linux kernel or Firefox or I don't know, Django, we still can live, and thanks to the dedication of some developers that do the work on their free time and so on. So yeah, it's a bit tricky, but it works. And economically, it works also. We are not unicorns, but it works.
The main business plan that for the companies around Triton is to sell services on Triton. So the service they provide often involve improving Triton itself. So this is the main way Triton evolve and keep up to date with regulation and so on. The other point was about the maintenance and the security. We have some process that allow us to ensure that we don't break too much Triton. First is that we have written a lot of tests for every module has a set of tests by default that ensure some integrity and quality in the Triton, in the code, the Python code, and so on. But also we write extended tests for many key modules, like for accounting, sales, and so on. We have two kind of tests. The first one is unit test. So we test usually a method on a class and with different values and so on. And we have also a larger test, which is more about integration test, where we script a full workflow in the application. By full workflow, I mean that we have scenario that start, create a sale order, validate the sale order, validate the shipments, and post the invoice, check that the accounting is right, ensure for the shipment that a back order is created, and so on and so on. And we have a lot of scenario like that. And indeed, each time we find a bug, we try to write a scenario that show the issue, or a test that ensure that the code is now tested for this kind of case. Then we have a continuous integration tool that build and run the test on each commit. And so if one change break the test suite, it harms the developer responsible for this break, and we try to fix it as soon as possible. And of course, we don't make a new release if there is an issue on one test. That's how we keep the state of Triton as it is now, the stability. The second point about also it's that we review all the change. So we try to have at least one review for each commit. It's not always easy to get because it takes time, and on such open projects, people don't always have the free time to make reviews. But we try to enforce that. And of course, the review also ensure the security of Triton, because we have more eyes looking at the code, and they may spot weakness and issue. And finally, for the particularity of the security issue, we have a specific process to report security issues where they are only known by a very small set of core developers, and they try to find a solution and provide a fix. And once we have a proper fix, we make a security release, which is coordinate with the packager of different distribution where Triton is packaged. And so we set up a release date for the security issue, which goes public only after this date. That's the point for security. And now for the people who are using Triton, the end users, they have the choice of two kinds of release to use. We have a long-term support release that we support for 5 years. So when this is the best choice if you don't want to upgrade frequently and have new features. This series receive bug fix and security release for 5 years. And otherwise, the normal release are supported for 1 year. So we give the choice to the users to choose which kind of frequency you want to have to upgrade. And we try to make bug fix release every 15 days. If, of course, there is bugs to fix. And I didn't say that, but we make a release every 6 months. It's a major release with new features, new modules, and new client, and so on.
And then as far as the usage of Triton, I'm sure that it's been used in a pretty wide array of businesses, and I'm curious what you have seen to be some of the most interesting or innovative or unexpected ways that it's been used and deployed.
One of the most interesting use, at least from my point of view, is the one that GNU-Else is doing of Triton. So GNU-Else is a project under the GNU umbrella, and their aim is to provide
an HIS, Hospital Information System.
Yes, an hospital information system.
And sorry, just to jump in because it was a little hard to hear. So what he's saying here is GNU Health.
GNU Health, yes.
Yeah, GNU Health.
GNU Health is an hospital information system which stores medical records of people, usually from low development countries like Congo, Jamaica, and so on. Because in countries like Europe or I guess the United States, you have a lot of red tapes and laws to follow, and it's really difficult. GNU Health its main point is to bring computer science and informatics to those countries and to help them to have a good traceability of people. So they don't really care about all the problem that we care about in our country, but in GNU Health they care about stuff that are really vital. And so they have a lot of modules for obstetrics and I don't know, anything that goes with the medicine, and it's really a nice project. There's also the project of John, which is something that I didn't expect it. So.
Sure, I'd be happy to describe our implementation. So we are a law firm that services the aviation industry, and the aviation industry is very heavily regulated and record intensive, and so we have a web portal side that is built basically using Flask, actually using a slightly different project called myriad, and our clients use that to input all of their data through web forms, and it goes into our Triton database. And then we have also in terms of our internal workflow, a large number of discrete sort of small tasks that we need to do for each of these clients. And so we have Triton handling our web front end and then also handling our flow of tasks and sort of assignments and delegations of tasks to people inside the company so that we can make sure that we've got a good audit trail and clarity that each and every item is getting done. And that's how we use Triton.
This is far away from all usual cases, which are more web shops and sales related or purchase related implementation.
And indeed, we had also a project that was a little bit different than the usual. It's a project we developed for a company. Where the main goal was to provide an application on the cell phone,
smartphones,
where people could buy small stuff like sandwiches from the local grocery, and they could order it when they were at work in the morning. And schedule the time when they want the sandwich. And so the payment was collected by the application, and behind there was a Triton server receiving the orders and dispatch the orders to printers in the shop of different grocery everywhere in the city and so on. And so they received the ticket with a number and the orders, and they prepare it for the time it was specified. And so the guy who ordered it with this application can go to the shop and take directly the bag with the cart with the shopping item, and without having to pay because it was already paid by the electronically and so on. And so it was a way to skip the lane in such a shop where everybody goes at the same time, get his food directly. And so the commerciant could organize the work, prepare in advance the orders and so on. So that was a nice project where Triton was involved to follow the orders you receive from the application, dispatch to the right shop, and make a small accounting about how much was sold and so on. At the end, send the total money, order it for to each shop. That was an astonishing way of using Triton.
And then in terms of the future of the Triton project, I'm curious what you have in store in terms of new feature capabilities or future direction for the project.
The Triton project is no real roadmap because it's built by the community, for the community. And so each one comes with his own needs and own targets and own goals, and try to push it in the project. So this, we cannot guide which direction we go or which feature we want to implement for the next release and so on, because it depends on what the community will provide. That's the main picture.
Yes, but of course we have some ideas that are lingering and that we would like to implement. So, for example, we are thinking a lot about creating more specific applications. Right now, we have an application named Chronos, which is a browser plugin which allows you to input your timesheets. That's also the scratch your own itch, because we use it to invoice our customers at B2CK. And I guess other people in the Triton community use it because we know a lot of people that work the same way as we do. But those applications, they use specific paths in every modules. So if you want a module, can open a path, an entry point, yes, in the HTTP server, which you can put or pull data from. And thanks to this entry point, you can enter directly into Triton with, of course, your credentials and so on, and have some specific actions. So, for example, for the timesheets, you can fetch the timesheets of specific days, but you can also push a new line in your timesheet, or you can edit a new line, an existing line. And we would like to have more application like that. For example, to do the shipping in the warehouses.
But yeah, it's dedicated application. So in some way, it's a way to hide Triton behind a very tailored user interface.
I think that something big for the future of Triton is the LTS, the long-term support, which was just added maybe about a year ago. And as we've talked about, Triton's been around for around 10 years and has had this philosophy of we are willing to break things to improve things. And so as Cédric was saying, there's a new release every 6 months. Traditionally, those releases had only received a year of support, and so there was some aspect of conveyor belt of needing to upgrade to the new versions. But now we have gotten to where the core Triton functions I think are pretty stable. I mean, so for example, Nicolas described earlier that it transitioned to the active record model a few years ago, and that was quite a bit of API changes. But there haven't been any changes like that since then, or in quite a while. And I think that Triton is now stable enough that, as you can hear from what Cédric and Nicolas are describing as new additional features, things like support for browser plugins, that's not going to be sort of breaking changes that would threaten existing installs. And so I think that a big driver of more people starting to use Triton is knowing that they have LTS, that they have 5 years of support in the version that they install, and greater stability to the API. And the fact that the core devs have been willing to make such changes has gotten Triton to where it is now, which I think that there are very elegant idioms that it's using. It's a very nice system to code in. And now that that's not changing so much, long-term support is possible. And like I said, I think that that's going to be a big driver of more and more people using Triton.
Yeah, indeed. Another point that we are working is to include a web shop directly. So for now, there is many solution, but external solution to plug a web shop to Triton. B2CK have developed some, but others also have developed web shop extension and so on. And for now, there is a work going on to support View Storefront, which is a new web shop front end that is
based on Vue.js.
Yes, so it's an SPA, single page application that support also the progressive application.
PWA, it's progressive web application.
So it can work offline and so on. And so there is a module in review for now to plug Triton and Vue Storefront. And this could be also, once it's polished and included, a big change for Triton, because it will provide out of the box a web shop to small business. And that can be very helpful for many companies, yes.
There's also the ergonomy that we would like to make a bit better, but it's difficult.
Yes, we have the work that we try to display the right data at the right time to the user. So it's a little bit a mix of having a dashboard, but tailor it for the type of user you are, depending of your access and permissions and so on, but also to try to provide you the next task you should work on. So we have some blueprints going in this direction. So probably in the next years, we will have a better way of pushing the work.
All right. Well, for anybody who wants to follow along with the work that you're doing or get involved, I'll have you each add your preferred contact information to the show notes. And so with that, I'll move us into the pick. And this week, I'm going to choose audiobooks because I've been listening to them more with my kids as a way to keep them busy and as a way to keep us all entertained. So definitely recommend finding some good audiobooks, whether through your local library or through a service such as Audible. And so with that, I'll pass it to you, Nicolas. Do you have any picks this week?
Yes, indeed. As everybody, I try to have something to think that is a bit joyful. So I started to play Civilization 6. There's been years since I haven't been playing Civilization. In fact, my first contribution to open source was to FreeCiv, the free software clone of Civilization 2. And now I started to play again to Civilization 6. So if you have some times, you can start to play Civilization 6. Or read a book. I read an excellent book from an author of China, Liu Cixin. It's the three-body problem. It's science fiction, but from the point of view of China, so it's a bit different than usual. And I found that the liberty of speech of the author was quite surprising to me, because he described in the first chapters the cultural revolution of China, and it was awful. But I was surprised to read that in a Chinese book. So if you like science fiction but with a twist because it comes from another cultural background, I really recommend it.
All right. And how about you, Cédric? Do you have any picks this week?
Indeed, I started to read the integral of Valérian et Laureline. It's a French comics from the 70s. Yeah, it's a big influential in science fiction culture. Indeed, it seems there is they influenced the Star Wars movies and many other stuff. So yeah, it's old comics, but I enjoy reading those.
And Jonathan, how about yourself?
Well, my pick for this week, I think, has to be hand sanitizer, as we are all hunkered down dealing with the coronavirus and waiting to see what's going to happen in the next few weeks. But no, the thing I'll give a shout out to is, it's not exactly a pick, but it is a new project or startup that I've been trying to get going for the last year, and I think that we're set to launch hopefully in the next 2 months. It is royal.com, Royal spelled ROIL, as in Roiling River, and it is a better way to interact with RSS feeds, a better way to enjoy content on the internet. So been working hard to get that going, and hopefully we're rounding the final turn and should have a public release in the next couple months.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for taking the time today to join me and share your work and experience with Triton. It's definitely an interesting project and one that a number of people obviously rely on. So I appreciate all of your time and effort on that front, and I hope you each enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tobias.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out our other show, the Data Engineering Podcast, at dataengineeringpodcast.com for the latest on modern data management. And visit the site at pythonpodcasts.com to subscribe to the show, sign up for the mailing list, and read the show notes. And if you've learned something or tried out a project from the show, then tell us about it. Email hosts@podcastinit.com with your story. To help other people find the show, please leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends and coworkers.